All right. Well, hello. Welcome to second part of homework 1.1, and that is the exercises. And so what you can see is at the top of the screen, we have the exercises that go along with the notes that we previously completed. If you haven't done the notes and for some reason you're jumping onto these exercises, you do need to do the definitions and warm-up questions prior to then adding this to your same assignment of exercises. Okay, so this would, if you're in your comp book, this would go right underneath your homework 1.1 notes. And then you just rewrite homework 1.1, you got your exercises, or you could just write exercises. And then here we go, page 9, 13 through 27, 39, 41, odd. The odd always applies to the entire assignment. So that, in other words, these are all odd. If for some reason I do give you an even problem, that'll be clear. And again, the reason I only give you the odd problems is because I want you to be checking your answers. Because even when we're in class, the time it would take to just go over every single answer to every single problem is not, I think, the best use of our time. And so I purposely only give you answers that you can look in the back of your textbook and check so that you can see how you are doing. And then go back and make corrections if you missed it, or come ask a question of me or a classmate if you don't understand, well, how did they do that? It looked like magic. I don't get it. Now, of course, obviously, someone could say, well, then, I can just copy all the answers out of the back and, it'll be, I can cheat because you're giving me the answers. Well, two responses to that. One, because if you just write the answers in the back, you won't show any work. And that'll be very clear. I'll see your exercises and you won't have any work showing how you got those answers, which it becomes more and more the case as we work through the class. And so that'll be clear that you're not really doing it yourself, and so you won't get credit. The second reason is because you won't learn it, and your tests and your quizzes will show that, and you'll just start to fail everything. And even though you got your quote unquote got your homework done, you didn't learn anything. And just one basic tip is you're here to learn, not just to get things done. I'm glad you want to get your homework completed. That's good. But if you're not learning it, then why are we bothering? Okay. So check your answers, and obviously don't copying from the back won't do you any good. So here we go. You have 13 through 27, 39, and 41 odd. I'm never going to do all the exercises with you, but I am going to do a sampling. So what I have here is 13, 15, 17, 21, and 23. And so we're going to work through those. And these are coming right out of the textbook. So I'm on page 9 right now. I'm looking at number 13. This drawing that I've already set up to get things going goes with questions 13 and 15. And I'll usually sketch things if they're really relevant to what we're talking about. So here we go. 13 asks, the directions say use the figure to name each of the following. So we're identifying them. 13 says 3 collinear points. So if you remember collinear, means to share. And so 3 points on the same line. So I've got 2 lines here, basically this one right here and this one right here. And you can say, okay, where can I see 3 points together? Well, I've got E, B, and although there's not a dot, this A is designating this point, because wherever lines cross is a point, A. So E, B, A, you see 3 points, they're on that same line, whereas if I go in the other direction, I only get A and C. So pretty simple problem. 3 collinear points would be A, B, and E. Don't hurt yourself. It doesn't have to be that hard once you get your vocab and you know what you're talking about. Sorry about this pop-up that ruined the end of the last video. I'm going to get that taken care of. Okay, so here we go. That's number 13. There's no other possible 3 points that are on the same line. So we got Abe, A, B, and E. Okay, number 15. A plane containing E. So they're talking about here E. So how do we name this plane that is containing it? It's on this surface. And so we've got E. How could we name that? Well, there's really 2 ways. One is if you look in the corner, there's got kind of this fancy cursive S. That S doesn't correspond to any particular point when it's fancy and cursive or kind of italicized, however you want to look at it, written that way. That means they are calling this sheet, this plane, S. So one answer to this question would just simply be plane S. Okay. You can only do that because S is not a point, and you can tell that by how it's written. It's written differently from the other letters, and so you could call it plain S. The other way you could name it is, if you remember from the definition, you could find any 3 points on the plane, and you could name it that. If you only name 1 point, that has no dimensions. And so if I were to say, oh, D, I'm going to call it D. No, because that point could go in all sorts of different planes or directions. So that's not enough. If you said BE, if you just use 2 letters, that also isn't going to tell you, because if this is BE, that plane could be going like this through that line. It could be going like this through that line. It could be going like this through that line. And so if you just say 2 points, that's not enough to identify a plane properly either. So if you remember the definitions, we said you need at least 3 points in order to know that you have a plane. Because if I say BE and then I have point A over here, that immediately creates a surface between those 3 points that has to be a specific plane. So pick any of those 3 points on there, and then you can have a plane. So I could say plane S, or I could say plane A, B, C. You probably wouldn't, what you wouldn't want to say is you wouldn't want to say plane ABE, because that's also a line, and you'd run into the same problem. If they're all in a line, you might not be talking about a specific plane, because you could have all sorts of different planes you're talking about. So ABC is a good answer. ABD would be a fine answer. Lots of options. ED, EDC, anything that's not, any 3 points that aren't on a line is how you would name a plane. Okay? And let me pause here and note that another key aspect to exercises is, once you have a final answer, and sometimes you can't do this because your answer is a sentence or it's a big long thing, but if your answer is a simple set of letters or whatever, you want to box your answers, because what that tells me on the exercises is that you finished the problem. This is my official answer. And so for 15, I could say S is my answer, or ABC is my answer. You don't have to list all these. I was just simply giving you an example. But please box your final answer, unless you just use kind of common sense. Unless your answer is like a drawing, you don't have to box your drawing. Or if your answer is a bunch of different, a really complicated sentence or something, then you don't have to box that. But otherwise, please do. So I can tell, oh, okay, 13 and 15 are finished. Okay, let's look at 17. 17 is now new instructions. It says, draw and label each of the following: a pair of opposite rays that contain R. Okay, so opposite rays mean that they have the same endpoint. So if I have a point here, remember, a ray starts at an endpoint and then extends in the opposite direction. Extends in one direction. An opposite ray has the same endpoint but extends in the opposite direction. So those are opposite rays. If you were to do something more that looks more like an angle, like have a ray here and a ray there, those are not opposite rays. We're going to X that out. Okay, they have to go in opposite directions to be opposite rays. Okay, so we have here a nice drawing of an opposite ray, and then if it needs to contain point, what does it say, point R, then, well, I got this point here, I might as well go ahead and call that R. So those are opposite rays, and then they have a point on them known as R. So that's it. This would be an example of where you don't have to box this. If you want to, go ahead. But there's your opposite rays containing point R, because they go in opposite direction. You could draw it. Now, if I did it slightly in the other version, if I went like this and like this, that's perfectly acceptable as well. That would be fine. Okay? Either one, as long as they're going in opposite directions and you have point R on there. Okay, 21. 21, it says sketch a figure that shows each of the following. So again, we're sketching. And notice, so these are not necessarily, there might be problems in between here, but these are the ones I've just chosen to highlight and explain in detail. 21, 3 coplanar lines that intersect in 3 different points. So you might have to sketch around a little bit to get this to work, but all we're basically saying is you need 3 lines, and they have to intersect at 3 different points. So let's just start drawing. Say we got a line here, and since they're lines, I'm going to extend them. Draw another line here. Okay, and so now I've got 2 lines and they're intersecting right there. So if I draw a third line, let's just do that. Well, let's see, they intersect at 1, 2, 3. Simple as that. Those are 3 coplanar lines and they're intersecting at 3 different or distinct points. Okay, not Not too tricky. As long as pretty much any 3 lines you draw, that's going to work, so long as you're not drawing parallel lines. Okay, 23. Oh, turn the page. Draw each of the following. So I chose to do some of these drawing ones. Plane H. Notice there's the fancy, if you're reading in the book, there's the fancy lettering to designate where one letter, the one time one letter can designate an entire plane. Plane H containing 2 lines that intersect at M. Okay, let's do it. So here's my plane. Draw a nice big one. There's my plane. And it's plane H, so I'm going to put my fancy little H lettering there. There's my plane H, but it has to contain 2 lines that intersect. Okay, that's not too hard. Do a line there. Put the arrows on the end because it's not a segment, it's an arrow, a line. Let's do another line right there. So 2 lines that intersect, and the intersection point has to be M. Okay, sounds good. So the intersecting point is M. So I've drawn a plane. I've labeled it H, and then there's 2 lines on that, and it's containing point M. So just getting used to the vocabulary. Again, once you know what you're talking about or you've seen it demonstrated before, you'll see this is a pretty nice slow start. Nothing too complicated. Hey, no polynomials or factoring yet. So if you weren't a fan of algebra, you're off to a good start. Okay, so those are all the samples that I'm going to show from this exercises. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully you don't find it too difficult. If you do, you'll have a chance to reach out to me and get some help. But that will be the end of this video. And again, I'll usually do anywhere from 3 to 5 of the exercises with you to just kind of help you and give you some direction. With the ones I usually will pick out one of each kind of different type of question, or the ones that I think I've seen students struggle with the most. I also just remind you of how to do this well. You should always include the page number. Should always include the page number and the whole problem set with all your exercises. I should always see that on any of your homework assignments. Then you don't necessarily, I drew this. I only drew this because I wanted to see it while I talk to you. You have this in your textbook. You would not need to do that drawing. But notice your answers are always boxed once they're final, unless they're kind of a great big drawing, then that's not the end of the world. Also, I'll mention, notice I worked vertically. Okay, I really don't want you to do it like this. Like do number 1 here, number 2 here, number 3 here. Okay, once we get where there's more algebra in the problems, that becomes a problem, an issue. So please work vertically. I know sometimes people feel like, oh, I want to use all the paper and I'm only using one little column of it. You know what, the tree, it's made its sacrifice. Don't worry about saving too much paper there. Plus, the other reason you don't want these here is because when you get to a point where maybe you do solve a problem, and you've got your answer here, and this is all blank, this is where you can do corrections. You can do corrections right next to the problem. That's another key reason why I don't want you to work horizontally. Please work vertically. And so the proper place for the next problem after this would be right down here. Okay, you guys have a great day, and good luck.